Jeff.
Joe, what's up, my friend?
Monday. It's what is up right now. How was your weekend?
It was good. You know, a girlfriend and I, we went to the Vancouver Zoo.
Okay.
And it was very, very fun. Rented a little quadricycle. Definitely recommend it if you guys have never been to the zoo. It doesn't matter what age you are. Who doesn't love big cats?
True.
What about you? I know you were busy. You had some open houses and you said a lot of people came through.
Yeah, no, and I had a couple of buyer tours. It seems like there's a lot of people out there looking around, I must say. Now, whether or not that's going to translate into any sales, that's different. But I can definitely feel like ever since September kind of started, there's just more and more people out there going to look at open houses. Like I said, maybe they came back in town and, you know, after all the summer vacation, and now kind of life goes back to normal, and maybe they, you know, want to be part of it again. We don't know. Like I said, it's what I say in market updates, right? You know, it's kind of with the market where, you know, you can spin the story any way that you possibly want to right now.
Well, that's great news, and it ties directly into our podcast today.
Yeah. So a lot of people, especially if you work with us before, you'll know that during, especially if you're looking to buy, during the first consultation, we always like to provide a 10-step buyer's guide. And what we wanted to do is really to kind of quickly go through it. And the reason why is because, you know, we feel like the fear of unknown it's always very, very high, especially buying a home in BC, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. Because in Canada, any province or whichever province you buy, the playing field is a little bit different. And of course, buying in BC is extra scary because number one, our elevated price point, one misstep could become extremely costly. Number two is just there are some pitfalls here and there, regardless of which kind of product type you're really trying to go for. And number three, and a lot of people tend to forget, is that buying a home, doesn't matter which province you're in, is not a one-person thing. I really wish a realtor I could just, hey, you know, and I'll just take you from the beginning all the way to the end. But the reality of the fact is that there's a lot of different parties that actually gets involved. And, you know, because of that, I just think that this is probably the right podcast, and this is the right time for us to kind of just quickly run through it, just so that people understand, okay, well, if I want to buy a home tomorrow, these are the things that I would expect.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's get to it.
Let's do it. So we're going to do it step by step. You know, every time we have we want to talk about the next step, we'll make it very clear for you guys to kind of know. So the first step, when, you know, Jeff, if you're ready to buy, I always tell is choosing a realtor. There's over 15,000 realtors in Greater Vancouver. Where do you start? Right? We both know that when it comes down to time to sell your home, a lot of people are very adamant about interviewing multiple agents to make sure that they know what they're talking about, and they do have the seller's best interest at heart, and they have kind of the experience and the product knowledge to go with that. But for some odd reason, on the flip side, if you're looking to buy, a lot of us just literally look at our closest friend, our closest family, or whatever they'd refer, but like, okay, that's the one. But the fact is, this always puzzles me a little bit, is that a buying agent, they need to know as much, if not even a little bit more, than what a selling agent needs to know, right? And why is it that when you're trying to sell your home, you're okay with, you know, you're very adamant about the best out of the best, but when you're buying a home, you're okay with whoever? Yeah,
it's like our standard and qualification process just went completely out the window, which is very puzzling.
Exactly.
Because like you said, buying is no less complicated than selling a home.
Exactly, right? When we buy a home, at least when I'm trying, if I ever buy a home, these are the things that I want to know. I want to know if my agent knows the current market. I want to know if my agent is going to listen to my wish and want list and be able to translate that into a goal for them, for something that they can find. Do they even know how to keep me safe in terms of contract writing, right? Because the buying agent is the one that's writing the contract. Like if you have any misstep, it could put you in a very disadvantaged situation when things start to go south, right? And another thing is, like we already mentioned, was like, does this agent have enough people in their back pocket to ensure that it's a smooth sailing, literally from the point you meet all the way until when you get your keys? Do they know the lawyers? Do they know the notaries? And we'll kind of cover that in our 10-step process as well.
I know, and that's something that that client at UBC really appreciated, is that, wow, you guys made this process so stress-free and so seamless. They were able to buy a home and move into it within what, like 3 weeks?
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I like to say, you know, a realtor, sometimes it feels like a project manager. You're literally making sure that all the lines kind of fit into, you know, the proper channel at the proper time frame. You know, at least my clients always tells me that. I have a really, I have a client in tech, and he was just like, you know, he's a project manager. He was like, Joe, honestly, like what you do and kind of what I do, yeah, we're talking about different things, but then the reality of it, that our duty is the same. It's just, we just line things up to make sure that everything gets, you know, as smooth as we humanly possibly can.
Master facilitator. Make sure you choose the right one.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, right? So that's choosing a realtor. Now you have chosen a realtor. Jeff, you want to quickly talk about step number 2?
Yeah. Step 2, honestly, to me is just as important as step 1, and that's a pre-approval process, aka knowing what your budget is. Not what you think your budget is, but actually going to talk to a big bank or a secondary or private lender and figuring out exactly how much money you're able to borrow. Now, if you're someone who falls into the category of, hey, I'm backed by bank of mom and dad, or you have accumulated enough money to make the entire purchase yourself through cash, congratulations, you are one of the few lucky ones. But this doesn't apply to you. Yeah. But for probably the 90% of the other buyers out there, this will pertain to you. So please make sure you pay attention. Aside from figuring out exactly how much you can afford, another important piece of information is to know what your payment process is like. Are you paying monthly? Are you paying bi-weekly? How much of a down payment are you going to be putting down? There's a lot of cases and horror stories, not really horror stories, but sad stories of clients who thought their budget was maybe $1 million. They start going to see homes for $1 million. Then it's time to write an offer, and then they go talk to their bank and they're like, hey, actually, you're only approved for $800,000. Wow. Well, not only was that a big waste of time, but you also hopped on the emotional roller coaster, and now you're going downhill and into a pitfall of disappointment. And that's something that Joe and I as realtors really want to try to avoid for our clients. It's emotional enough to buy a property because it's the biggest purchase that you're probably going to be making in your life. And we're doing our best to mitigate the amount of stress that comes with it.
That's right.
And when a market is hot,
like what we just came from,
knowing exactly what your budget is allows you to go in and write a competitive offer, sometimes even a subject-free offer, which will definitely increase the chances of you getting the property that you want. If this sounds like too much work for you, well, let me ask you this question, and please think about it carefully. How would you feel if this is the one step you didn't do that prevented you from getting your dream home?
That's right.
Let that sink in. And lastly, please talk to different banks. Just as you should talk to different realtors when you're looking to buy or sell a home, talk to different banks and financial institutions. Just because you bank with them does not mean that they're going to give you the best rate. Joe and I both have examples of this.
It's true. And another thing I will say at this point right now is that a lot of buyers, maybe that's you right now listening, is that they're very afraid of talking to multiple banks because they're really afraid of getting their credit pulled too many times. So I just want to use this really quickly just to tell people is that you don't have to worry about this. Yes, when you apply for mortgage at different banks, they will pull your credit. But the system is smart enough for them to know is that, oh, you just got your credit pulled by, I don't know, say Van City, and then next week you got credit pulled by TD Canada Trust. The system, when you do your second credit check, is not going to hit you as hard as the first one. Like example, it's not going to be like, oh yeah, every time you do a credit check is -10, -10. It's not like that. The system is much smarter than that.
Yeah, and if that going to that second or third bank for another quotation would save you $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, would you go and do it? Yeah, I know I would. Exactly.
Or even like a more suitable term. Maybe it's a term where it's like, oh yeah, Jeff, after like 1 year, you could pay 20% of the principal money. And that's somehow very suitable for what you need. And maybe another bank would be like, hey, at the end of the term, you can only pay 10% of the principal or something like that. So different banks, different playing fields, you know, so just make sure you talk to different banks to make sure that that is the one that is most suitable to your needs. Yeah.
Perfect.
There we go.
Step 3 goes to Joe with compiling your wish list.
And before I start, a lot of people they take step 3 as step number 1. Come on, let's be honest. They want to, all of a sudden they're like, I need to buy a home. And then they just like, well, I want this, I need that. No, like take a couple step back, talk about step number 1, talk about step number 2. Okay. And a wish list, it's really what we like to call what are your needs and what are your wants. Or another way of saying it, what is your must have and what is your would like. And we always suggest for everybody to really think about this. And if you are sharing the decision making with someone, your significant others or someone else, make sure you also talk to them about this need and want. There's so many cases I'm laughing because I just thought about it, is that me and Jeff, we brought a client out, a family out to see a home, and then you can tell by the husband, it's like, I love it, I absolutely love it. And you remember what the wife did? The wife literally pulled me aside. It's like, Joe, don't get my husband to put an offer for this one. I beg of you. And we're in the middle. We're just kind of like, what do we do? Like, because both of them are our clients. We have agency relationship with both of them. So both of their best interest is our best interest. But if their best interest cannot even align with themselves, what can we do?
You can see where it kind of can get very, very complicated. So please do not put your realtor and yourselves in that position. Do this homework before you move on to step 4 so that you can simplify the process, have the difficult conversation with your partner, and make sure you guys are one voice about what it is exactly that you want.
Exactly.
Clear, concise communication with your realtor will make everything go smoother.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of the questions that agent or yourself or you should be asking your spouse as the needs or wants. Number 1, how many bedrooms do we need? How many bedrooms do we want? Sometimes it's the same, sometimes it's different. Number 2, how many bathrooms do you need and how many bathrooms do you want? Number 3, where is the location of this particular property? For a lot of people, this is the non-negotiable part. I want to be on the west side, I want to be on the west side. You show me all these beautiful houses on the east side, ain't gonna try and pass me over to the east side or vice versa, right? And this is where pre-approval is important. What is your budget? You don't have a budget, then we don't know where to start either, right? Number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 6, are you guys planning to have pets? If this is a stratified home, do they even allow pets? Or do you want to get into a situation where you don't have to see any pet because you don't want your neighbors to have pets, right? The next one is rentals. Are you planning to rent this out in the future, or do you rather live in a no rental allowed kind of building? Another one will be, do you like new? Do you like old? Or do you like old that's renovated? That's all different. Another one is exposure. And, we both from Asian backgrounds, we hear this a lot, especially with our past generation, is like, I only want south. That's the only thing they want. That's not a want, so that's a need. So it's like, Joe, if you send me anything that's north facing, Jeff, you send me anything that's west facing, I am not even going to look at it. Okay? Another one, and this is kind of where it gets a little bit more detailed, being close to transit, being close to work, being close to a mall, being close to all your favorite restaurants. Is that a need or is that a want? Most of the time, this could be a want, but for some people, that's a need.
Yeah, if you don't have a car and you probably cannot live in Burke Mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So these are just some questions that if you're thinking about, please, honestly, talk to your spouse, talk to your agent, and just run this through before you take the next step.
That honestly sounds like a very complicated process. And you know what? Once you move on to step number 4, those could also change. Yes. And what's step number 4? It's pounding the pavement. Yeah. Okay, now it comes to the more exciting part. You actually get to go see a property, and hopefully your vision of what your wants and needs will come to life. And when you do this, most home buyers, I would say, kind of know within the first 10 to 20 seconds whether or not a home is for them. How many times have we gone to see a property with a client and we schedule 15 minutes and then boom, 2 minutes, they're done. They do one lap, they're like, it's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's them being polite. I give a perfect example. I had a client, that we were supposed to go into a home. The listing agent literally opened up the door and she was like, I'm done. I don't even want to go in anymore. Sometimes it's just like that.
And another thing is, on the flip side, beware of homes that look too good.
Yeah.
Make sure you look up and down and like in all the nooks and crannies. Don't be fooled by the fancy furniture or the 70-inch TV. A perfectly staged home versus a home that's not staged at all can look like two complete different properties. So please do not get fooled by all the fluff and the smoke and mirrors. And your realtor will guide you through that too, because they're your second set of eyes. They're there to keep you safe and protect you from falling into that pitfall.
Absolutely.
All right. So we've seen a property. We know what our budget is. We found a realtor. We know what our wish list is. Now we're ready for step 5, which is to make an offer. Now, after you've seen that beautiful home on the weekend, you tell your realtor, Jeff, Joe, I really, really want to make an offer on this place. Okay, well, there's some things that we have to discuss before we put down on an offer. Number 1 being price. Just because a property is listed at $1 million doesn't mean that you have to pay $1 million for it.
Right.
And also, what you're willing to pay for this property may not be the final purchase price for it. There can be some negotiation. So your initial offering price, please discuss it with your realtor and figure out what is the best strategy to use moving forward.
Correct.
Along with price, your deposit amount. Please remember that when you purchase a property, generally after acceptance, if it's a subject-free offer or after final subject removal, a 5% deposit of the final purchase price is due at that time.
Right.
You cannot just work that into your mortgage. So make sure you have those funds ready to go to give to your realtor when the subjects are removed or when the offer is accepted. Number 3, completion date. Do not mix this up with possession date. Both are different, and we can go over that in detail in another podcast, but possession date is actually when you get the keys, and completion date is when the funds are transferred over.
That's right.
Lastly, subjects. Okay, we've talked about a subject-free offer, which means that, hey, aside from the purchase price, there isn't really any other negotiation other than when you take possession of the property. Now, with subjects, which are generally what we see more often of in today's market, there's 5 or 6 major subjects that Joe and I typically advise our clients to work with. Number 1 being subject to financing. Number 2, subject to inspection. Number 3, subject to the buyer obtaining proper home insurance. Step 4, reviewing the property disclosure statement. Step 5, reviewing and approving the title. And the step 6 is a maybe, because if you're not in a stratified property, this doesn't apply. But step 6 would be to review the strata documents. What's the condition of the building like? What are the bylaws like? The things that Joe talked about, are they allowed pets? Are they not allowed pets? Well, if you want your little sushi or toy poodle to make sure that they're allowed to and welcome in your new home, that bylaw in that strata document better allow for it.
That's right.
There are other subjects that you can put in. You can literally put in whatever type of subject that you want. There's also inclusions and exclusions that you guys can put in. For example, if you really, really love that painting of the Mona Lisa, that replica, you can write it into your contract, tell your realtor, hey, I really want that to come with the unit. Or, hey, I really want that TV mount because it fits my TV perfectly. They can also include that.
That's right.
The last step of writing an offer is setting an expiry date. How long do you want to give that seller time to consider your offer? Because you as a buyer, you might be shopping for other homes. If you leave that offer open for acceptance indefinitely, well, now you're just wasting your own time.
Yeah, exactly, right? There was one thing, I'll kind of give the listener a example of a craziest subject that I have ever dealt with, just so you understand that, yeah, we talk about the big 5 or the big 6, depending on the product type. There are some unique situations that you might want to write as a subject that, it's unique to you and your situation. There was one time that I was working in a pre-sale center. The market wasn't super hot at that time. I had a client that wrote, subject to them selling their red truck, attaches the photo for X amount of price, on or before this specific date.
This is true story.
True story.
No BS.
True story. This actually happened, and that is probably the wildest subject that I actually see get accepted and also removed or fulfilled.
That tops anyone that I have.
and I just wanted to kind of share that story, just so people don't understand. You're not confined by the Big Five or the Big Six, but Big Five and Big Six is generally what every realtor should be going through with you.
And that's the subjects that we picked to protect you.
That's right.
Once you've written your offer, okay, now it comes to step 6. Your realtor will submit your offer on your behalf to the seller's realtor. And upon submitting to the seller will have 3 responses.
Yeah.
Response number 1 is, wow, you guys wrote such a great offer that the seller is going to accept it. No questions asked, no back and forth. Boom, congratulations.
Congrats.
Pass go, collect $200, move on to the next step. In an ideal world, that's how every deal would be.
Especially that's what buyers would like to see.
100%. But in reality, the second scenario is the one that's more likely, and that is the counter scenario. What that is, hey, the seller likes to work with you based off of some of the subjects that you've put on. Maybe your price is good, but your completion date and stuff is like a little far off. But they're willing to work with you on that offer. Step 3, or option number 3, flat out no. They do not want to work with you at all. They don't want to negotiate with you. For whatever reason, they just don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
And these are probably the 3 reasons why offers get rejected most often. Number 1 is the price. The price is just too far off. The seller doesn't even want to talk to you about it. Number 2, the completion date is too far. Maybe the seller has already purchased a new home and they need to complete within 2 months. Well, hey, you're not ready until 3 months. Well, if we can't get on the same page, there's probably no point in continuing the negotiation any further.
Right.
Or number 3, the subject removal period is too far. Generally, subject removal periods are about a week. That's how long it should take for a realtor or a buyer to do their due diligence, generally speaking. A more complicated piece of property, sure, it can take longer. But if you're asking for a subject removal period for 2 months, well, the seller might just think that you're kind of wasting their time.
Exactly. And I'll give you a perfect example. Last week, I helped one of my clients put in a home for one of the properties that he wanted. He literally says, hey, Joe, thank you so much for the offer. I actually received a higher price offer. And I asked him why. Okay, well, you should have taken it. If there's a higher price offer, what are you talking about? It's actually quite close to asking price. Like, what are we doing? Oh, I didn't take it because their subject period was 1 month. Okay, that makes sense. A lot can happen in a month. And he was just like, oh, I don't want to get I don't want to get my home tied up. So I just flat out rejected him and say, no, come back with a better offer. And I'll come back with a shorter subject, I guess, in that terms, because the price was really close to asking. Yeah. So just a couple of examples there.
Okay, well, that about wraps up submitting your offer. Should your offer get accepted, hopefully it does, that brings us to step number 7, which is your due diligence, which Joe will go over.
Yeah, so, due diligence is really just trying to now have the offer accepted, and then now you're trying to obviously tackle all the subjects, right? Or sometimes we like to call it working on the subjects. So of course, talking about financing, immediately after accepted offer, you should be sending your offer to your mortgage specialist for them to give you the final approval. The second thing, of course, you should be calling up a inspector to kind of get things all lined up to make sure that they go in and be able to kind of do their job. You definitely want to spend some time maybe reviewing the property disclosure statement, which will be quick. I mean, it's like 30, 40 questions. And it's a yes, no, do not know, or does not apply. And then you obviously want to review the title. Now, the title gets a little bit tricky sometimes because it's not really meant for everyday person to kind of understand. You maybe want to get your lawyer, maybe you want to get your notary or get your agent involved. What me and Jeff does for all of our buyers is that we actually translate, we work with a lawyer office, and then they will translate the title, including all the covenant easements, whatever they have on there. And then they will put it in a more everyday English, so for you guys to understand. And that way you have a full understanding. Because let's be honest, sometimes the title, I also like to say, I understand what's written there in terms of the characters and how it's put together, but I have no clue what actually all of this is supposed to mean.
Yeah, honestly, to me, a lot of times it's just like words on a page.
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, of course, This is, people don't talk about this, but this is important, is maybe taking your contract or taking that address and then just start bringing it to insurance companies to make sure that your home is insurable. This is important for single detached houses. For townhouses or stratified homes, there's the building insurance already. You bring it in there, they should be able to insure you. It'll just depending on how much.
Yeah.
And that is basically kind of doing your due diligence, and after, of course, everything as you kind of work through it, as you kind of fulfill it or you waived it because you don't think this matters to you, you can either choose to remove the subject as you go or you choose to remove your subject at the end. But of course, that will take us to the next step, which generally is the last step that people do when they're doing removing the due diligence, which is of course inspection. I'm not going to get into what inspection is all about. We had a whole podcast about it, but I'm just going to say people generally like to put inspections last is because out of my previous step number 7, this is the only step that really costs some nominal dollars. Reviewing titles, reviewing strata documents, getting your financing like this ain't gonna cost you a penny. Well, it shouldn't at least. But inspection is the one that will. Okay? So like I said, we did a whole podcast. Not gonna talk too much about it. Of course, after the inspection goes through, everything is great. You remove all the subject, and then that will then link us to step number 9.
Boom. Time to contact your notary or lawyer. If you guys don't know one, Joe and I do work with a network of notaries and lawyers, but basically what they do is they check over all the property paperwork, and they make sure that the title gets transferred over and everything, all your ducks are in a row.
That's right.
What's the difference between a notary and a lawyer? Well, basically a notary can do all the things a lawyer can do until something goes wrong and you need to start suing people. At that time is when you need to hire a lawyer. So it's really up to you guys who you decide to use. Of course, a lawyer is generally a little bit more expensive than using a notary, but for most residential transactions, a notary can do the job.
That's right.
The notary will, order the strata documents. They will order the title. They'll make sure that the owner doesn't owe any special levies on the property, and so on and so on. So usually 1 to 3 days before completion, the notary will contact you. You'll have to go in, they'll review all the paperwork with you, and they'll also instruct you on how much you should put in on your bank draft when you come in.
That's right.
The bank draft amount will consist of the total purchase price minus minus the 5% deposit you paid, plus the property transfer tax, and any of the soft costs that are associated with their services.
That's right.
Now, due to COVID-19, of course, some notaries and lawyers, they offer a Zoom service where you can do it virtually, because imagine if you guys live in Hong Kong and you're selling your property in Vancouver, well, the time difference and everything is complicated enough. Well, it's also might not be feasible for you to fly from Hong Kong to Canada just to go sign some documents. So for a fee, this could definitely be doable.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
After step number 9 comes the most exciting step. Step number 10 is moving in. Now, Joe will also say that step number 10 can be the most exciting or the most stressful.
Oh yeah.
Depending on how you handle it and if you do or follow the proper steps to minimize the stress.
Yes.
These would include things like changing your address, booking your moving company.
That's right.
Booking with your strata to make sure that the elevator is available. If not, they might charge you a fee, or a worst case scenario, the elevator might not even be available. Report to your strata your Form K and to set up your pre-authorized debit form and payment to pay for your strata fees. This is a list that Joe and I will provide for our clients.
Yeah. But for this podcast, I think what we'll do, especially you're on the YouTube version, we'll make it happen right there. This is the form that we generally give to our client once they had accepted the offer, just to remind them what are the things that you need to be careful of, and obviously change your address. If you're listening through Spotify, you don't know what we're showing, email us, get in touch with us. We'll send that out to you as well. No problem whatsoever.
And that basically sums up the 10 steps. We'll go over them again really quickly in case you missed it. But, if you have any questions, as always, you can contact us. Step 1, choosing your realtor.
That's right.
Step 2, pre-approval, finding out what your budget is. Step 3, writing down your wish list. Step 4, go out there and see some properties. Step 5, make an offer. Step 6, submit your offer. Step 7, Joe?
Step 7, do your due diligence.
This is Joe's favorite step. Actually, step 8 is Joe's favorite step. It's the inspection process.
And then step 9, talk to hire a notary, hire a lawyer. If you don't know any, ask your agent. And step 10, the most exciting part, or the one that literally will give you a migraine headache, is moving in.
Of course, we only lightly touched on most of these subjects. Each subject we could make an hour-long podcast about it. We just really wanted to kind of give you an overview and shed some light on this process, hopefully reduce the amount of stress that it can cause. As Joe said in the beginning of this podcast, like, fear of the unknown is generally what causes the most headaches for buyers. And it's our job as realtors to try and minimize that for you.
Exactly, because if you have unknowns, then you hesitate. And once you hesitate, whatever you thought made a lot of sense maybe wouldn't make any sense anymore, right? So in order to make sure that your agent is always on the same page, that's the reason why we created this 10-step buyer's guide here.
If there's anything you have questions about, or if there's any other topics that you want to hear about or learn more about, please let Joe and I know. That's the only way we're able to create more content for you that's relevant to you, the listener. Because this is the whole reason why we're doing this podcast, is to help educate the general public.
That's right.
By now, as always, you should know that my name is Jeff.
And my name is Joe.
We are the Mike for Vancouver Real Estate.
No, thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Please like, comment, subscribe, or like I always like to say, help us with the algorithm. And like Jeff always says, that if you have any questions, please get in touch. If not, we really, really look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, guys.
See ya.